Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Technology, a podcast exploring the latest in computers, networking, home automation, mobile computing, and all things technology related. Our hosts will take a deeper dive into the latest and greatest in tech trends and give you the information you need to enable your tech-centric world.
This is Insights into Technology, Episode 8, CISA Shakeups, and a deep dive into cybersecurity frameworks. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and this is your tech news for the week. This first article comes to us from Tech Radar. Google offers predictions on the biggest security threats facing businesses in 2025. Google's cybersecurity forecast for 2025 highlights artificial intelligence and state-sponsored cyber attacks as the top security threats facing businesses. AI's dual role as both a defensive tool and as an attack enabler is central to these concerns, with Google predicting its widespread use in generating deepfakes, phishing schemes, and in other social engineering tactics. State actors from Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, dubbed the Big Four geopolitical threats, are expected to continue targeting critical infrastructure amidst escalating global tensions. The report also emphasizes a persistence of ransomware and data extortion as significant challenges, with incidents reaching record highs in 2024 and showing no signs of slowing. Google predicts a second phase of AI security will emerge as semi-autonomous systems become integral in combating these evolving threats. However, as generative AI tools empower attackers, cybersecurity teams will face mounting pressure to counter increasingly sophisticated and frequent breaches. And so we've talked about this in the past, how AI is a dual-edged sword when it comes to cybersecurity. In cyber attacks, we've seen them used for generating deepfakes and phishing schemes. They've been used for overall social engineering attacks, but they've also been used to generate actual malicious code as well. And then more so, I think, in 2024 than prior years, we've seen AI used as a defensive tool as well. Organizations are increasingly adopting AI-driven security tools to automate threat detection and response. This second phase of AI security that Google talks about suggests that enterprises need to integrate semi-autonomous systems into their cybersecurity operations to stay ahead of the attackers. I think that's, of all the things, and a lot of what came out of this article with Google was kind of a no-brainer type of, let's pick, the usual suspects, and they really did. I don't think there was anything shocking or unexpected that came out of this report from Google. But I think the one thing that came out that probably has the most potential impact is defensive AI for cybersecurity. They talk about the geopolitical threats. That may become less of an issue under a new Trump administration, considering how close Trump seems to be with these big four aggressive nations, Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. So that might not be as much of a factor as Google thinks it's going to be. However, chances are, if there isn't outright intentful attacks, you may see opportunities for these attackers to embed themselves in various pieces of government infrastructure and become advanced persistent threats that can be triggered at a later date, or just exfiltrate information on the fly. We do also have to take a look at the rising complexity of ransomware and extortion or double extortion tactics from the ransomware. Google anticipates these attacks will grow in 2025, particularly outside the US, which I thought was kind of interesting that they expect these types of things to happen outside the US. The problem with ransomware and extortion is you have to have an economy that supports it. And unless you're hitting a first world country that can afford to pay millions of dollars to not release their company's information, you're kind of limiting your market when you get outside the United States for that. Plus, if you look at the regulations that's going on in the European Union, the penalties for paying for these types of things and being subjected to these types of things is extremely high. So, the emerging challenges of large language models are also talked about in this article as well, with threat actors using LLMs to automate a lot of the convincing fake emails. So companies probably are going to need to implement more robust employee training programs focused on identifying AI content. I know one of the things that we're working on in my company right now is an actual AI governance policy. This is becoming kind of a requirement for every company out there that's trying to take advantage of the newer technology. And the other thing that they're talking about in this article is the continued targeting of critical infrastructure. And we have an article later in the show that highlights exactly this type of thing, where the critical attacks on critical infrastructure are going to get progressively worse. And it's unclear how the United States now under the new administration is going to respond to this, especially with some changes in CISA coming up that we'll talk about as well. So there was a lot of useful information that came out of here. Nothing that's probably policy defining, but it's certainly things that should be considered significant and things that we probably need to keep on our radar. And, with budgeting time coming up at the end of the year here, it's going to help us shape our cybersecurity budgets moving forward, anticipating where we need to focus our attentions and our efforts. One of the things I'm learning rapidly is cybersecurity is an expensive endeavor, regardless of how you go about it. Our second story today comes to us from Security Week, and they tell us that the CISA director, Jen Easterly, is stepping down. CISA Director Jen Easterly and Deputy Director Nitin Natarajan. I apologize for that. I'm not very good with names. They'll be stepping down on January 20th, coinciding with the transition to the new Trump administration. And they'll be clearing the way for new leadership at the U.S. Cybersecurity Agency. Easterly is a decorated intelligence officer and has led CISA since 2021, spearheading initiatives like the Known Exploited Vulnerabilities Catalog, the Shields Up campaign, and Secure by Design principles. Her tenure solidifies CISA's role as a critical responder to federal cybersecurity threats, despite criticism regarding the agency's budget efficiency. Easterly's departure comes amid escalating cybersecurity challenges, including a recently disclosed cyber espionage campaign by Chinese state-backed hackers, Salt Typhoon, targeting U.S. telecommunications and critical infrastructure. With CISA actively coordinating federal responses to nation-state intrusions and ransomware threats, the leadership transition will be closely watched as the agency navigates its evolving role in safeguarding U.S. digital infrastructure. So this leadership transition in the middle, basically, of a cyber war, I wouldn't say it's controversial, but it is risky. We're actively being hit right now by an aggressor nation's attempts to infiltrate significant infrastructure elements of our country. So the change in leadership is going to seriously draw into questions how we're going to address these threats and maintain operational continuity, but also how serious the new administration is going to take these threats. There's a number of other significant and scientifically proven world-changing issues that this administration simply chooses to ignore or not accept as fact. And that type of cavalier attitude can be very dangerous when it comes to how you're handling cybersecurity. Easterly has a legacy of strengthening U.S. cyber defenses, which have been historically pretty abysmal when it comes to most things involved with cybersecurity and government. We have elements of the government that are still running off of old COBOL software that needs significant updating, and hopefully, we're not going to lose sight of where we are. We got to keep our eye on the ball, obviously, and we need to make sure that our cybersecurity is taken seriously and taken into consideration by the government on our side. CISA has recently moved into this role as managing our federal cybersecurity strategy, and it has rapidly taken on elements in pretty much every aspect of the federal government, and the inability for us to focus on this during an administration change can be impactful, to say the least. We already kind of talked about some of the challenges of the incoming administration and whether or not they're going to take this seriously. We also can't ignore the fact that the nominations for department heads that we've seen that came out as a flurry of announcements in the last week or two are putting people who are grossly unqualified into these roles of significant responsibility. If they play the same type of political disruption game that they're doing for cabinet positions with CISA, that's a significant risk to our infrastructure, especially when it comes from the countries that the incoming president has basically claimed to be friendly with. It's highly unlikely he's going to take these threats seriously. So we'll see what happens. We're going to take a quick break, but before we do, I'm going to do two things. One is I want to apologize for last week. I did sit down last week to record a podcast. I was kind of under the weather. I got about 20 minutes in and was coughing so bad I had to stop the podcast. So we didn't put out a technology podcast last week, and I apologize for that. But we're here now. We're here today. And one thing I wanted to do today was to remind our listeners and our viewers to subscribe to the podcast. You can find audio and video versions of this podcast and all of our podcasts listed as Insights into Things. We're available on Apple, Spotify, Google, TuneIn, anywhere you can get a podcast these days. I would also invite you to contact us. Give us your feedback. Tell us how we're doing. Tell us what stories you'd like to talk about. Give us your input on the stories that we are talking about. You can call in to our voicemail and leave us a message at 856-403-8788. That's 856-403-8788. If you'd like, mention in your message that you would like to have your comments in the podcast. And keep them clean, obviously. Keep them on topic. We may edit them for content and context, but we'll do our best to get them on the show as soon as we can. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com, or you can find links to all these and more on our official website at www.insightsintothings.com. And we'll be right back.
Are you tired of your favorite gaming podcast finishing with a play?
Oh, no!
Well, check out No Credits Rolled, where we play the games but rarely finish them. How's it going, folks? I'm Sam Whalen, your friendly host at No Credits Rolled, the ultimate gaming podcast, where we dish out the latest scoops and reviews on all your beloved video games.
Hey, listen!
Not only that, but we spice things up with some guest interviews and even give you, yes, you, a chance to have your say. Tune in every other week for a fresh dose of No Credits Rolled, available on all major podcast platforms, and hit us up on social media at No Credits Rolled. So why wait? Let's dive into the gaming world together, where finishing games is optional, but the fun is guaranteed.
Welcome back to Insights into Technology. We're talking tech news today. Our next article comes to us again from Security Week. This one tells us that the EPA warns of critical risks in drinking water infrastructure. A new EPA report reveals that over 300 U.S. drinking water systems serving 110 million people are vulnerable to potentially devastating cyber attacks. These systems face risks ranging from service disruptions to data breaches, with 97 systems serving 27 million people identified as having critical vulnerabilities. The assessment highlights the weaknesses in areas like IT hygiene, email security, and exposed portals, which could allow attackers to cause irreparable damage to critical infrastructure. The report also underscores significant gaps in the EPA's cybersecurity response capabilities, noting the lack of dedicated incident reporting systems for water facilities and insufficient coordination with federal and state agencies like CISA. The findings come as water utilities across the U.S. grapple with outdated systems, default passwords, and alarms that seem to keep going off for no good reason, and insufficient security measures, highlighted further by recent attacks like the one targeting American Water recently. These vulnerabilities underscore the urgent need for stronger cybersecurity measures to protect vital drinking water infrastructure. Now, this is very similar to the infrastructure attack that we're seeing recently on telecoms and other similar services. These infrastructures, these critical infrastructures, are soft targets for cyber attacks. They're often underfunded. They are working off of antiquated hardware and software, and they've not had the resources to simply go through and harden their systems. As a result, vulnerabilities pile up, and attackers are going to start going after these soft targets because they're easier to hit than the ones that are getting the type of attention that's required. And basic IT hygiene is not a difficult thing to achieve. It doesn't require a lot of money. It doesn't require a lot of training. What it requires is a lot of common sense. Identifying basic cybersecurity failures like default passwords in use, using uncomplicated passwords, not using dual-factor authentication, enterprises nowadays are leaning very heavy into, especially moving into the cloud sector, where the cloud's forcing a lot of dual factor authentication to happen. This also shows the risk of supply chain attacks, which all pose business continuity risks. The water utilities often serve as upstream providers for other industries, which, disruptions caused by cyber attacks can cascade through supply chains. You can also use these exposed infrastructure systems to piggyback on these and infiltrate other systems, billing systems, and so forth down the line that have more widespread exposure. This also highlights the need for proactive incident reporting and coordinating of systems. The lack of a dedicated cybersecurity incident reporting system for water systems highlights the gap in federal coordination. When problems arise, if you cannot get the word out, you cannot stop the system spread, nor can you get the support that you need from federal agencies. All in all, it signifies an emerging threat landscape. You've got soft targets, you've got underprotected targets, you've got targets that may be relying on third parties to secure them, where those third parties can even become threats to the systems. So it's definitely something, and again, this was something that was highlighted in the Google report, the cybersecurity outlook for 2025. It's definitely something we need to keep an eye on. Our next article comes to us from 9to5 Google. This one is talking about the Department of Justice wanting Google to sell Chrome to break its search monopoly. The U.S. Department of Justice is pushing for Google to sell its Chrome browser as part of its proposed remedies in the search monopoly case. The DOJ argues that Chrome's integration with Google's search engine gives the company an unfair advantage by serving as a key access points for users. Questions remain about how such a sale would affect the open source Chromium project, which underpins not only Chrome, but also other browsers like Microsoft Edge. Google, which plans to appeal, warns that splitting off Chrome could disrupt its ecosystem. While antitrust officials have backed away from forcing Google to sell Android, they recommend decoupling Android from Google's other products, including the Play Store and Search, which are currently bundled together. Other proposed remedies include requiring Google to license its search data and results and allowing websites indexed for search to opt out of AI training. Final ruling on these recommendations is expected in August of 2025, with the potential to reshape Google's operations and the broader tech landscape. So this is strangely reminiscent of the Microsoft Internet Explorer monopoly fight that they had with the Department of Justice. This is, again, another example of the federal government using traditionally heavy-handed tactics against businesses, despite the fact that the business that they're trying to affect doesn't operate the same way that more traditional businesses act. And when I say that, I don't mean that Google is special or something like that. The problem is that they're trying to take examples of trust busting, of monopolies in railroads and steel and, all the stuff from the 1800s that was done, and apply it to a technology where the technology evolves faster than the litigation does. So trying to impose monopoly control on these types of things is difficult. It also shows a fundamental lack of understanding on the part of the federal government on just exactly what this means. Google is not just an American company. This is an international company setting international standards for an international system of communication. For the federal government to come in here and try to implement the same type of stuff they did for Standard Oil and other companies, it just shows a naivety on the part of the federal government and a lack of understanding of what they're dealing with. And it's almost like a knee-jerk reaction that we're seeing. You may see one of the other alternatives they're talking about is the Department of Justice's push to uncouple Android from Google Play and search in an attempt to reduce Google's control on the mobile ecosystem. Well, they built the ecosystem as much as Apple has built their own ecosystem. And for the federal government to come in and tell you that you can't run your system the way that you want, I mean, to say that it's politics is an understatement. But it's also almost juvenile in its nature and how they're going about it. So hopefully this is not something that's going to drag future development of the internet down and bog us down in a lack of innovation. That's usually what overregulation tends to do on the part of the government. The last article that we have today comes to us from The Verge. I thought it came from The Verge. I didn't have this one up, but okay. We'll run without the graphic. Microsoft's new resiliency initiative aims to avoid another CrowdStrike incident. I'm sure everyone remembers the CrowdStrike incident that took down so many systems. It's rumored to have taken down a quarter or a third of the internet, from what I heard. Microsoft has launched the Windows Resiliency Initiative to bolster security and recovery measures following the widespread CrowdStrike incident that disrupted 8.5 million Windows PCs and servers earlier this year. The initiative includes new recovery features, such as quick machine recovery, which allows IT administrators to remotely fix systems even when they cannot boot properly. These updates aim to ensure rapid response and enhanced resiliency for future incidents. A key focus of the initiative is moving antivirus processing outside of the kernel to avoid catastrophic failures caused by deep system-level vulnerabilities, excuse me, like those exploited in the CrowdStrike incident. Microsoft is working with security partners to adopt safer deployment practices and frameworks that reduce reliance on kernel-level access. The company also announced upcoming enhancements to Windows 11, including administrator protection features that grant temporary admin rights for specific tasks, adding another layer of security. This initiative reflects Microsoft's broader efforts to improve the security landscape, including transitioning critical Windows functionality from C++ to Rust, a memory-safe programming language. These changes align with calls for the White House to adopt more secure coding practices and underscore Microsoft's commitment to making Windows more robust and resilient against emerging threats. Well, I've said it in the past, anytime that we're counting on Microsoft to make things more secure, we're all in trouble. However, the catalyst of the CrowdStrike incident and the widespread impact on the industry can't be denied. Microsoft's attempts to make these corrections, I think, is admirable. I think their attempts to fix these problems, even though they're not their problems necessarily, is probably a bit of an overreach. Some of the things that they're talking about, like the quick machine recovery and remote fixes, sound fantastic on paper. I mean, it would be really nice if we could do these types of things without compromising security. As a IT professional myself and system administrator, some of the things that Microsoft wants to do is wonderful and makes me wonder why they haven't done it before. Why did it take a global tragedy for this to prompt these things? Some of the other things, like moving antivirus functions out of the kernel, have been things people have been talking about for well over a decade now. It's all stuff that's theoretically possible. Why wasn't it done before? I have to seriously question Microsoft's motives for it now. So we'll see. I mean, if we get the type of utilities and tools and functionality that Microsoft is promising here, I think it'll make a huge difference. I don't see how it's going to fix the next CrowdStrike issue, because the next CrowdStrike issue is not going to be the same thing as the last CrowdStrike issue. But we'll see how well this improves the overall security posture and recovery ability of systems across the board. That was all we had for our tech news. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to talk about cybersecurity frameworks. We have a 5-part series that we're going to delve into here. I'm labeling this a deep dive, but it's not all that deep. I think we have to do some fundamental explaining before we can get into anything really deep. So we're going to kind of do that as a shallow dive over a 5-part series, but we'll be back after this.
Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com.
So we're going to talk cybersecurity frameworks for a little bit here. Despite the fact that this is a 5-part series with a significant amount of detail, it's more of an introduction than a deep dive. But we really need this, this is only going to scratch the surface of cybersecurity frameworks. But it should provide an understanding of the basic concepts of cybersecurity frameworks, and it's needed before we can do any kind of a deeper dive. We're going to talk about what cybersecurity frameworks are, what their purpose is. We'll then take a look at some of the more common cybersecurity frameworks across several industries. Finally, we'll take a look at some of the emerging frameworks and discuss some compliance strategies and common challenges. And then we'll look at the future of cybersecurity frameworks and computing in general when it comes to security. So what are cybersecurity frameworks? That's probably the first question we should start out with here. So, in short, get on the right frame there. So, I got thrown completely off here. Here we go. Cybersecurity frameworks are structured guidelines and best practices designed to help organizations secure their information systems and protect sensitive data. These frameworks are essential tools in today's digital world where threats to personal information and corporate assets and national infrastructure have become more frequent and sophisticated. Each cybersecurity framework provides a foundation for protecting data and maintaining the integrity and functionality of systems that people, businesses, and governments rely on daily. To understand cybersecurity frameworks, it's helpful to differentiate between three core concepts of compliance, standards, and frameworks. Compliance refers to adhering to a set of rules or regulations, often enforced by law or industry authorities. For example, businesses in the financial sector must comply with specific regulations to protect customer data. Standards are detailed technical guidelines or specifications created by organizations like the International Organization for Standardization, ISO. These serve as benchmarks for implementing effective security practices, but aren't legally binding unless adopted into a regulatory requirement. And finally, frameworks provide a structured approach that organizations can follow to build a comprehensive security program. Unlike strict rules, frameworks are adaptable, allowing organizations to tailor security measures to their unique needs. Cybersecurity frameworks are critical for both businesses and individuals. For businesses, they provide a roadmap for creating secure environments that protect customer data and maintain trust. Adopting these frameworks reduces the risk of data breaches, fines, and reputational damage. For end users, frameworks indirectly enhance security, ensuring that companies handling their information follow best practices to prevent misuse or theft of their personal data. Now, there's several well-known cybersecurity frameworks that have been established to meet the needs of different sectors and types of information. We're not going to discuss all of them here. We're going to discuss a handful of them. We're going to discuss probably the most popular, well, I say popular, but most well-known ones. And we'll discuss a couple that illustrate the need for protection across different specific industries. The first one that we're going to talk about is ISO 27001, which is an international standard focused on information security management used globally by organizations looking to formalize their security practices. We'll also look at the NIST series of frameworks, 853, as well as 800-171. We will talk about HIPAA, which provides a framework specifically for the healthcare industry. And then we'll talk about PCI, or PCI DSS, the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, which protects cardholder data. And then finally, we'll go into a little bit more detail on CMMC, or the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, which is a relatively new framework developed for contractors working with the U.S. Department of Defense. Talk about that a little bit more detail because that's the one that I'm most familiar with. Each of these frameworks plays a significant role in shaping the security posture of organizations worldwide, encouraging them to build resilient digital defenses. Next week, we'll get into a little bit more detail on each of these. We'll start to get into detail on each of these and talk about some of the specifics. Until then, I just wanted to introduce these. I think my voice has gotten to the point where I've reached a stopping point myself, as you can tell. But before we go, I did want to once again encourage our listening and viewing audience to subscribe to the podcast. I would also ask you to reach out, give us your feedback. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. You can find us on Twitter or X at insights_things. We're on Instagram at instagram.com/insightsintothings, or you can find links to all those and more on our official website at insightsintothings.com. That's it for this week. Another one in the books.